everyone. We are going to look at diffusion. This follows our discussion that we had on kinetic theory of matter. In the kinetic theory of matter, we noted that we have particles, okay? And these particles are arranged differently in the different states of matter. We noted that in solids, for example, the particles are close to one another, and they are held by strong intramolecular forces, or forces of attraction between them are strong, and therefore these particles cannot move freely, but they can vibrate. And if you are to separate these particles apart, you will need to hit these particles such that the bonds can weaken and the particles can move. That is, they gain kinetic energy. Okay, so basically throughout through all the other states of matter, we're saying that the gases and the liquids, you still have these particles, but for them at least they have some freedom of movement, and therefore when you increase the temperature, you give them more kinetic energy because they already possess sun. So when you increase their kinetic energy, that means that they move more freely. Okay, so what is the evidence that actually this is true? Diffusion and Brownian motion are the two experiments that can prove that indeed matter consists of particles that are moving, that are under constant motion, especially for liquids and gases. Okay, so we are going to look at these two concepts, diffusion and Brownian motion. Okay, so in this presentation, our focus is only on diffusion. We want to see what is diffusion. Okay, how does diffusion explain, or how does it explain the kinetic theory of matter? Or why do we say that diffusion is evidence for kinetic theory of matter? Okay, so how can we see diffusion? What experiments can we conduct to show diffusion, whether in liquids or even in gases? So let's kickstart this presentation. So on top of those things that I've just listed, we'll also look additionally at the factors that actually affect the rate of diffusion, and then we'll also see the examples of diffusion in our day-to-day lives. So diffusion is the spreading of particles of matter from areas of their high concentration to areas of their low concentration until the particles are the same in both regions. So this is what happens. For example, in this image here, you can see that ink, which is colored, was dropped into a bottle of water. This is basically a conical flask. Okay, so that ink eventually started to spread out. Okay, so this is a demonstration of what diffusion is. The particles are very concentrated in here, so they start to move to areas where they are of less concentration. So that's why the area is now bigger, and that's why it is also bigger here, and eventually it will cover the whole conical flask. This can be a beaker, it can be anything, but basically that is demonstrating how these particles spread out, and that is basically what diffusion is. Okay, so this is basically one example of ink spreading throughout a bottle of water. That is a demonstration of diffusion. When you have ink, this is ink here. When a drop lands on a piece of paper, it will spread out. That is also diffusion. When someone is cooking and maybe you're seated in the sitting room, you'll smell the nice aroma, right? That is the diffusion. Okay, that is the diffusion. When you're going out, you put on a nice cologne. Okay, the person next to you will of course also smell that cologne. They will recognize that actually you have put on a cologne, okay, or a perfume. That is the process of diffusion. You could be seated maybe it could be in your room, and then someone is in the dining or someone, they feel that or they smell that perfume from you. Okay, that scent, you can call it scent. That is the diffusion. Okay, the food color. Okay, you sometimes you make a drink and then you want it to have a unique color. Then you place there some food colors on it. The whole drink changes the color. That is also the diffusion. So the diffusion is basically around us, and the examples are quite many. Okay, but what are we emphasizing? We're emphasizing that the particles move from where they are highly concentrated to where they are of low concentration until these particles are uniformly distributed throughout. We can use the word equilibrium to say that, okay, all the particles are now everywhere and there is no net movement. Okay, this is to say that still the particles, when all this container is now blue, it is not to say that the particles have stopped moving. Okay, they continue to move, but the net movement is basically not creating any difference in terms of concentration. The concentration is all the same. The concentration of the particles across or throughout the container is the same. That is what we basically emphasize here. Okay. So what are the factors that influence the rate at which these particles move, or the rate at which the diffusion happens? First is temperature. Temperature increases the kinetic energy of the particles, and therefore they move very fast, and hence the diffusion happens at a faster rate at high temperatures. And then we come to what we call concentration gradient. Concentration gradient is a simple concept. Like, okay, we are saying that the particle is here, that is colored, for example, and then these particles, this colored drop starts to spread out. Okay, what we are calling the concentration gradient is like the diffusion happens when there is a very big difference in concentration between what the particles moving and where they are moving to. Okay, so basically let's assume you have this one is pure water, and then you have another container, and that container is not having pure water, it's actually colored water, and that colored water is basically blue. The color of the water is actually blue because an ingredient has been added that is making the color be blue. Now, if you add another blue particle for the diffusion to happen, the rate here will be slow because the concentration gradient is not big compared to here. Okay, the difference in the concentration from both ends is what we call concentration gradient. The greater the concentration gradient, the faster the diffusion rate. And then we have what you call surface area. The area, the larger the surface area, the greater the rate of diffusion. This is basically to say that the more space you have for these particles to move, the easier the diffusion of these particles. Okay, and then also the smaller the particles, the faster. It's just imagine it as in terms of having someone who is more or who is overweight and trying to run, compared to someone who is big. Most likely the person who is small-bodied will be able to run faster. So this is the same thing that happens with particles. The smaller they are, the more likely that they will actually diffuse faster. And then the medium of diffusion is the medium. When we talk about the medium, for example, the water in that example where we put ink, that the medium is the water there. Okay. So if we have, for example, a pure medium, it is likely that you would have faster diffusion compared to a medium that is having a lot of impurities and other particles. For example, if you have impure water, the diffusion won't be as fast as when you have pure water. Okay, and then also diffusion, for example, in gases is likely to be faster. So diffusion in gases is likely to be faster than even in liquids, just because of the freedom of movement of particles. There are more spaces for these particles to move, diffuse, compared to what happens in liquids where the particles are more close to one another. Presence of a semi-permeable membrane is also another important point. And the semi-permeable membrane that we are talking about is a material that allows some particles to move in and others are not allowed to cross the semi-permeable membrane. This is especially very important in natural human cells. But we can also have what you call synthetic material that acts as a semi-permeable membrane that we can use in our experiments in the lab. Okay, so if there is no that membrane, it means there is no barrier. Every particle can move across the two regions. The molecular size, this is also related to the particle size that we will actually explain earlier on. Okay, the bigger the particle, the less likely it is going to diffuse faster. The smaller the particle, the more likely it is going to diffuse. Okay, so large particles diffuse slowly compared to small particles. So how can we show the process of diffusion in gases? So what you basically need to do is to get your glass tube, this one here, and then you close each end using the cork. Okay, so before actually close each end, you push cotton wool soaked in hydrochloric acid to one end, and then you also have cotton wool soaked in ammonium hydroxide to one end, to the opposite end, and then you close them up using this cork. Okay, now your observation will be that you see this white ring of smoke from the closer to the cotton wool soaked in hydrochloric acid. One, this is because the hydrochloric acid reacts with the ammonia from this other end, and therefore you have this ammonium, the white fused actually ammonium chloride formed here. This is to say that the ammonia diffused, and then the hydrochloric acid also diffused, and then they reacted, forming this white fuse. there. Okay, so this ammonium hydroxide is the white ring that we are talking about. Okay, so this is basically to say that ammonia, malt, hydrochloric acid also malt. Okay, so why are the particles moving? Because these are volatile. These ammonia and the hydrochloric acid, these are volatile liquids. That means that they escape into the space in simple words. Okay, so our next presentation is going to be on Brownian motion, and then we will see how we can compare Brownian motion to the diffusion. Okay, but in this presentation, we can highlight some of the things that we are going to look at in Brownian motion. What we shall have in Brownian motion is basically a simple setup where we have a glass cell and we have pollen grain in water, and then illuminated and then observed through a microscope, and we shall see that the pollen grain be moving in constant random motion. Okay, and that is basically demonstrate that still we have particles that are moving randomly, and that's why they are colliding with the pollen grains. Okay, and that still is evidence enough for what we call the kinetic theory of matter. Okay, so having understood that, we can look at the differences here. Here in diffusion, we are seeing that the particles are moving from where they are high concentration to where they are low concentration until an equilibrium is established. What we are calling until a uniform distribution is established. For Brownian motion, the particles will always keep moving, they will not stop. The collision is going to continue, okay, because the particles are in constant motion. The driving force is the concentration gradient, the difference between the concentration of these particles in both areas, right, in both regions. But here, you can't predict where the particles are going to be moving in Brownian motion, okay? And then you also have the issue that the direction of flow of these particles is actually predicted. You notice that they are going to move from high concentration to low concentration. Here you cannot predict, right? So you can't predict. They can move in random directions. And then the examples and the nature of motion also can be some of the two other differences that you can look at. Thank you for watching.